Okay, human biology class, here we go with urinary system video lecture number 2. Last time we left off looking at the nephron. Just to sort of review, here we have the kidneys, and right on top of the kidneys are the adrenal glands. Today they're going to get in the act just a little bit. So there's two kidneys. Remember, they're in the small of your back. There's peritoneum. If you got a chance to look at the pig dissection video yet, you know they're kind of held against the back wall of your abdominal cavity by that thin cellophane looking peritoneum, which also makes up mesentery. And so there's not protection for them. They're a delicate organ. They're full of blood, easily damaged. We talked about that. So there we have where the kidneys are. If we look at a kidney in cross-section, again an image from your textbook. Here's the image in cross-section, again from the dissection yesterday. Actually, in the fetal pig, the vein was on top of the artery. In humans, I don't know, or in the pig, I don't know if there's a flip-flop that goes, or that's just the way the artist chose to draw that. At any rate, this is the artery carrying dirty blood into the kidney. Here's the vein carrying clean blood but deoxygenated out of the kidney. And here is the ureter that is carrying urine out of the kidney to the bladder, and which would then go down the urethra and out of the body. Okay, so then if we look at the kidney, we see the three parts. We see the outermost part called the cortex. We see the middle part made up of what looks to be kind of triangular shaped things. That's the medulla, and they're called pyramids sometimes, but the medulla. So cortex is the outer, medulla is the middle, and then this gristly part here, or down here, is the renal pelvis. That's where all the filtered products from all the 1 million nephron that you have in each kidney gather, are collected, and are flow down the ureter to the bladder. If you know somebody that's had kidney stones, they can gather here and plug the ureter. This is one of the places a kidney stone might occur. I'll talk about those in the last lecture. At any rate, if we look at this portion of the kidney here, a little more up close, right here, we can see that basic structural unit of the kidney. That is the nephron. Okay, sounds like some kind of arch villain from Star Wars or something, the evil nephron. They're not evil, they're good, okay? And so here's the nephron, and we see most of it is in the cortex, but some of it goes down into the medulla, and we're going to talk about the significance of that today. So that nephron is what we were focusing on last time. And here is your textbook's look at a nephron. I like this picture too because it has some actual electron micrograph pictures of nephron that are isolated, and we can see them here. And this first part would be the Bowman's capsule. This portion right here, that's the capsule here, which surrounds that specialized capillary bed called the glomerulus. And you can see it's unique because whereas most capillaries in the body have an arteriole going in one side and a venule coming out the other, this is just a wide spot in an arteriole, but it is an important wide spot. If we then look at an image that's not in your textbook that I used, and we'll refer to some more, here you can see how that nephron is actually positioned. We said how it's actually folded back on itself, whereas most commonly it's portrayed like this, which is an unfolded nephron. This portion would be folded onto this portion, and you know, just for the sake of understanding the different parts of the nephron, they are unfolded. But in the back of your mind, you always need to keep in mind that in reality, this is how the nephron is positioned when it is inside the kidney. Okay, last time we talked about the parts of the nephron, and I wanted to look at another picture. If I can find it, here we go. This is an unfolded look from your textbook of the nephron. So here we have the Bowman's capsule, and here we have the glomerulus, okay? And so the Bowman's capsule is kind of like a funnel that catches whatever comes out of the glomerulus here, and it concentrates it into the proximal convoluted tubule, the near twisted tube. Remember, proximal, near to a point of attachment. Convoluted means twisted, and it's a tube, the near twisted tube. So it's a filtering mechanism. If you remember from last time, it's covered with podocytes, the cells that look like a foot that create a filtering mechanism on the arteriole right here. So that larger molecules are retained in the blood, which is inside of this, and only fluid and small molecules get through this and into the glomerulus. Okay, so keep that in mind always. Okay, so if we look then at what comes through that sieve, the foot cells and covering the glomerular capillaries right here, there's some main things, and this image highlights some of them. Water comes out, of course that's a small molecule. Urea, glucose, amino acids, uric acid, salts, there's that generic salts again, all come out. They're small enough to get out through that filtration apparatus. But now you can look at this list, and some of them are good and some of them are not so good. In other words, some we want to keep in our bodies and some we don't want to keep in our bodies. And so it's the job of the rest of the nephron here to sort out what's good from bad and put the good back in the blood supply, which surrounds the nephron, and leave the waste material in the tube so that we can excrete it in our urine stream. Okay? So right here, water, well, we want that. I mentioned last time that if you consider what comes out of the Bowman's capsule here, if you take all the 2 million Bowman's capsules that you have in your body and you look at the work they do for a day, it would almost fill this 55-gallon drum. It's about 50 gallons of filtrate come out on a daily basis. So your body has to get a lot of that stuff back in it. Okay, so water is a big part of that. Urea, don't want that. Glucose, you want that. It's interesting. A person that is diabetic, one of the tests for how their body is functioning is a urine test for the presence of sugar. If your body is functioning normally, that nephron will reabsorb all of the glucose that is in this filtrate stream. In other words, everything that comes out of the glomerulus and is captured by the Bowman's capsule, we're calling filtrate. This mixture of good and bad. Okay, your body is really efficient at getting the glucose back in the blood supply. But if you're diabetic, there's a lot of glucose in your blood because it can't get into the cells. That can overwhelm the system, and you end up with glucose still in the urine stream. And so those test strips will test for that, and they can indicate the person's body condition, their need for insulin, that kind of thing. Amino acids, of course, we want. Uric acid, we don't. Salts, well, you know, it can depend on which salts we're talking about. So your body has to sort all that out, and probably the biggest part of the filtrate, that 50 gallons that comes out here and all the 2 million nephron accumulated, 60 to 70% of that was filtered out here gets back into the blood supply in the proximal convoluted tube, in the near twisted tube. It's really good at doing what it's doing. And it's kind of really super clever at how it does it. So you got to follow this. I get excited about this because it's that neat. Okay, so we want to get stuff out of the tube into the blood that your body wants to keep. Water's one of those things. So what does your proximal convoluted tubule do? Well, it's set up kind of special. If you look at a cross section of it, here we have a proximal convoluted tubule, an electron micrograph of it. Okay, and you can see the central portion here, and all lined along it are microvilli. Now, last time you saw microvilli, they were in the small intestine. And their job was to increase the surface area of the small intestine to give you more places to absorb into your bloodstream what you had digested. They were a good thing. Remember, you've got about enough to cover a doubles tennis court in your small intestine. You got another whole batch in all this part of all the nephron in both of your kidneys. And they are there again to increase the surface area so that your near twisted tube, the PCT, can efficiently get out of the filtrate that's in the middle here, get it out of there and back into the blood supply. That's what its job is. And it's going to do that. Sometimes it's going to expend energy to do that, so there has to be mitochondria here. to provide that energy. And this is an artist rendition, kind of not completely, but assisted, I guess I would say, of a cross section of the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, so it's got a unique structure to do what it needs to do. Lots of surface area, lots of energy production. Let's look at what it does. Again, if you have your notes handy, if you look at your notes, this portion of the PCT will actively transport sodium out. Okay, now active transport means it's going against the concentration gradient. It's going from an area of low concentration in here to an area of high concentration out here. And it's going to expend energy from these mitochondria to do that. It's the newspaper into the room analogy. Your body is spending energy to move salt out of the PCT and into the blood supply around it. Okay, but that's where it ends. Now, sodium, I said salt, I should have said sodium. It's spending energy to move sodium out of the PCT. So, sodium, if you remember, forms a positively charged ion. It loses that one electron it has in its outer shell, and it takes on a positive charge. So now you've got these positively charged ions out here. Well, what happens? Well, chloride is also in the mix, and it tends to form a negatively charged ion. If you remember, it only needs one electron in its outer shell. It gets an extra electron. It then has more electrons in the surrounding it than it has protons in the nucleus. So it has a negative charge. Well, opposites attract. So now your body doesn't need to spend energy because the chloride naturally follows the sodium out here because of ionic attraction. So now you got lots of salt out here. You got lots of sodium chloride. Well, along comes water because water follows along because of osmosis. You got a real salty area. You've got a watery area. Water comes out. How cool is that? How clever? What a neat plan God put in effect for us here. Your body only needs to spend energy to move one of those elements out, that being the sodium, and the rest move without having to expend any energy. Okay, so hydrogen also may be pumped in or out, and that's where that's one of the places that your body regulates blood pH. That can happen in the PCT, and that's about what I wanted to say about that. Okay, little Forrest Gump there for you. Okay, so really cool structure. So that's just happening here in this first part, the near twisted tube. It's near to this point of attachment here, okay? So the glomerulus covered by the Bowman's capsule gets that 50 gallons of filtrate. 60 to 70% of that is returned to the blood supply right here in this first part of the nephron. I want to look at the next part of the nephron. When I think of the next part of the nephron, I think of a little Eagles action here, a little Hotel California. More because you're paying money to hear this, but you know the song. Okay, the reason I bring that up is the guy that's singing there is the band is the Eagles. The guy that's singing there, his name is Don Henley, and this is the loop of Henley. Unfortunately, they're spelled differently, but I don't know. It's an association I make. Actually, that came out in 1976, the year I graduated from high school. Wow, time flies. Okay, so here we have the loop of Henley. Enough of a walk through history. And more cool stuff happens in the loop of Henley. 15 to 20% of water and salts come back out in the loop of Henley. And again, there's a really cool way that this happens. In fact, you just can't, I don't know, you can't believe how cool this is. So there is, of course, a descending limb and an ascending limb. And I want to go back to this picture so that you can see how this is arranged. Okay, so right here in this cross section of the kidney, here's the nephron. And so there's the glomerulus here and glomerulus here. And you can see how that portion of the loop of Henley descends down into the medulla. Okay, that's really important to know. Because this medulla is really salty. People feel it's because of the leaking of urea out of the collecting duct here. That's the part we're going to talk about. The deal is, though, that to remember is that this is really salty tissue. And where there is salt, water wants to go. Okay, so if you remember that, if we look then at this, there might be another picture here. Yeah, this one. we're going to look at this picture here. So here's the loop of Henle. So this is all medulla here, represented by this different color. Okay. So as the what's remaining of the filtrate that's in the tube here, as it descends down into the ever saltier medulla, water is naturally drawn out through aquaporins, those little holes in the cells lining the epithelium, lining the loop of Henle here, the little holes. So water can get out, and it's drawn out because of the salty condition of the loop of the medulla. So it's descending, water's leaving, concentrating the urine, making it saltier. But right about here, the door slams. There's no more aquaporins in this portion of the loop of Henle, the ascending limb. So water can no longer get out. But what's happening? Well, as that filtrate, what came out of here, it goes along to here. It's already been largely affected by the PCT and the descending limb of the loop of Henle, but now water can't get out. It wants, well, so it's rising in ever wetter tissue, if you will, because water's leaked out. So now more water can't leak out. So what happens? Well, the salt moves out. Now, when I say moves out, you got to understand there's a lot of detail to that. I'm not going to go into that detail. Needless to say, it's a phenomenally, well, I don't know how to say this. It's a really cool process to see happen, how you're set up. None of this by accident. All incredibly elaborate. So anyway, salt moves out, water can't move out, and so what happens here? What originally came out of the blood as filtrate has lost water and salts here. It's lost water here. It's lost salt here. So the volume of it has been dramatically decreased, but the saltiness of it is about the same because water and salts have come out in about the same percentages all the way along. So we would refer to the urine at this point as isotonic, about the same amount of water and salts percentage-wise as came out originally. Okay, so that's the loop of Henle. And so then we're going to get into the far twisted tube right here, the distal convoluted tubule. Here's proximal, near twisted tube. Here's distal convoluted tubule, distant. Distal means distant from the point of attachment. The point of attachment is considered to be right here around the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule. This is distant from it, so this is the DCT, the distal convoluted tubule. Hydrogen, ammonia, creatinine, drugs, whatever a person might have taken for good purpose or bad, is going to be put back into or put in the urine stream right here. That's why this tube right here is why drug tests in the urine stream work for evaluating whether or not a person has abused drugs that they shouldn't be messing with. Okay? So that's going on right here. Kind of a main thing to remember here, sorry if you heard me, I'm swatting some little bug that's floating around here too, kind of annoying me, so that's what's going on. But there's an important thing going on here. So let's look back at this picture. Okay, so if we take this from the start, here is the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. Here is the near twisted tube. I'm tracing it with the cursor. Hopefully you can see that. Okay. And it kind of goes around. Okay, and now here it goes down the descending limb of the loop of Henle, the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, and then we have the DCT, the distant twisted tube. But right here is what I want to focus on. Right here, the DCT actually flops back around and merges with where the afferent arteriole meets the Bowman's capsule. And there's a very important gland that occurs right there. It's called you're going to love this one, the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Now there's a Scrabble term for you. It's got an X in it even. How about that? And a J, which isn't bad. Okay, let's sort this out. Well, the glomerulus you already know. That's this capillary bed right there. So that part of the word we can understand. To juxtapose means to place alongside. So its name comes from the fact that it's placed alongside the glomerulus. Hence the name juxtaglomerular. And the fact that it's an apparatus should tell us that it's going to make something, and it does. So if we go down to look at that in a little more detail, your textbook has some good pictures. I just like this one a little bit better. So here would be blood flowing in, going through the juxtaglomerular, through the glomerulus here and out here. And so here is the Bowman's capsule. Here is the DCT, the far twisted tube that's been laid alongside, folded back over on these two arterioles. And right in here, we have that apparatus, that whole area of the kidney that produces certain hormones. We really want to pay a little attention to that. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where EPO is produced, erythropoietin. Look how cool this is. It's right alongside your arteries, so your body is well able to sense how much oxygen is in that blood flow, and so and do something about it. Produce that hormone, then that goes to the bone marrow and tells your bones to produce more blood cells. There's another one here that it produces. It also produces renin. Now renin is a hormone that it's kind of cool, and we're going to go into just a little bit of detail here. It affects blood pressure. Remember, your functioning of the nephron depends on the right amount of blood pressure to push fluid out of in the capillary bed through whatever can get through the podocytes here and become filtrate. If there isn't enough blood pressure, nothing will leave the blood, and your blood will accumulate toxins, and that will become lethal. Your kidneys will stop working. So they have a vested interest in keeping blood pressure up. Watch how this functions. Watch how all the rest of the cells in your body are affected. Okay, so renin is produced right here. Your liver is also producing a chemical called angiotensinogen. Remember fibrinogen? Remember pepsinogen? Pepsinogen was the precursor to pepsin, the enzyme that breaks down proteins in the stomach. Fibrinogen was a precursor to fibrin that made blood clots. Anytime, it's kind of an okay assumption when you see that GEN on the edge of something, you know it's a protein that's going to be changed into something else. It's an inactive form. Angiotensinogen gets converted by renin into angiotensin 1. Okay, and it's floating around in the blood. Angiotensin 1 goes to the lungs of all places, and there an enzyme called ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is a vasoconstrictor. Whoa, boy. Okay, constrict, to make smaller. So it's going to make blood vessels, like the afferent arteriole, the hole in the middle is going to become smaller. Now if you push the same amount of fluid through a smaller tube, the pressure in the system is going to go up, and that's what renin does. It keeps your blood pressure up. It also, this is kind of a long way around, it also goes to the adrenal gland and collecting duct, and it causes, it causes your kidney to absorb more salt into the blood, and where salt goes, water will follow. That increases blood volume, and that also increases blood pressure. Okay, angiotensin 2 also causes another hormone to be released, ADH, antidiuretic hormone. We'll get to that in the next lecture. Basically, that goes to your brain, your hypothalamus in your brain. Bottom line is, it makes you thirsty. So what does renin do? Well, renin makes this arteriole smaller, increases blood pressure. Renin makes us have more salt in our blood, more water in our blood, more blood volume, makes blood pressure go up. Renin also indirectly makes us thirsty. More water in the system, more volume in blood, pressure goes up. Wow, that is an elaborate system, folks. That is really pretty cool to me. Hope it is to you too. That's why if you know somebody that's had a heart attack, likely they'll be given an ACE inhibitor. Okay? An ACE inhibitor would be a chemical that would inhibit the function of angiotensin converting enzyme. Remember, the job of angiotensin converting enzyme is to make angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, which has the effect of raising your blood pressure. If you've had a heart attack, you don't want high blood pressure. So you take an ACE inhibitor to keep your blood pressure down. I hope you can see how that works, and the interconnectedness of all these parts of our body is phenomenal. Okay, last thing in this lecture then, just wanted to look here at this last portion. So here we have the Bowman's capsule, the near twisted tube, the loop of Henle, the distant twisted tube. This is the last portion here. It's called the collecting duct, and it's moving into the ever salty medulla, saltier medulla. If it's salty, water's going to move out, and so that's a place where urine can be affected depending on your body condition. It also moves well, bicarbonate and hydrogen, so it affects blood pH and volume. But if we circle back to one of those first growth videos I showed you, we can finally answer this question.
I'm getting low on water, and the only thing I can do is to drink my own pee.
I'm not going to make you suffer through watching that whole video again, but here's why old Bear Grylls was not doing himself any good. He said he was getting dehydrated. So what's going to happen is his collecting ducts will slam the doors and not slam, they'll open the doors. I'm sorry, they're going to open the doors, and his body is going to pull all this water out of the collecting duct and return it to the bloodstream to help restrict his dehydration. So if the water is coming out of the filtrate here, what's left in the system is more salty. It's got more urea, more uric acid in it, more creatinine in it. And so this is going to be extra salty because he's already dehydrated. He would never have done himself any good, but in this particular instance, he's done himself harm. It's the same thing as being on the ocean and drinking ocean water. You drink in that salt and you become more dehydrated. You drink your own urine, you're disgusting and you're dehydrated. Bad idea, Bear. Sorry, but it made for good TV. Last thing I want to mention, you maybe saw that picture there. There are animals adapted for living in dry conditions. There are animals in the world that never drink water their whole life. They get the fluid they need from basically fat metabolism. And here's some looks at those animals, and they have some rather unique appearances. This is a jerboa, okay, desert animal. Look at these great big ears, okay? And here's a fennec fox. Again, great big ears. If we got a chance, now this is for cooling, okay, that's why those big ears, a lot of blood supply there. If we got to look at their kidneys, in their kidneys we would likely find an unusually long loop of Henle. And so, loop of Henle, that's a new one. Loop of Henle. So that's going to make this urine ever more concentrated. So they will still urinate, but it'll be a thick, viscous urine, almost devoid of moisture because their body is so efficient at retaining moisture. And the last image I had there was one of what kidney disease can look like. This is actually a look at a cancerous kidney. More commonly, this is from your textbook, you'll see a polycystic kidney. That's what this one is. And this is when your collecting ducts a person's collecting ducts get plugged. And it's because they're twisted, they're not formed right. It's sometimes a genetic condition. And so the nephron fills up behind that plug. It makes these big pockets of fluid, and they further plug neighboring nephron, and it renders that whole kidney non-functional. So that's polycystic kidney disease, PKD or PCKD, depends on how you want to look at it. And so that's just an image that your textbook had in it. I wanted to mention briefly as well. Okay, we're going to finish up with a couple last things in the next lecture. Probably won't be as long. I always say that, and it ends up being long. But anyway, that's all for right now, and have a good day.